headlines. Korea's Constitutional Court throws out a decades-old anti-adultery law citing individuals' freedoms and right to privacy. Korea's kimchi exports may find a new big market as China is set to ease its regulations on pickled foods. And 3 New York residents are arrested on charges of trying to join and support the extreme militant group that calls itself Islamic State. Hello and welcome to Arirang News. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I am Kang Chery. Korea's Constitutional Court has struck down the law making adultery a crime. The law punished cheating husbands or wives with a maximum sentence of 2 years behind bars. Our Shin Se-min reports on what's prompted the move against this decades-old law.
Having an affair will no longer be a criminal offense. That's the ruling issued by Korea's Constitutional Court on Thursday, following 4 previous appeals, with the last being in 2008. The ruling is based on the argument that the law infringes on an individual's right to privacy and that extramarital affairs should be regulated by civil law, not criminal law. The decision has raised a question of whether some 5,500 people charged with infidelity since 2008 will file for retrial or compensation. And one uncertainty that's been expressed is that affairs could become more prevalent.
Adultery is still illegal. It is still a civil case. The criminal court is leaving the matter to the parties directly involved. What's worrisome is the low alimony payments for people going through a divorce because of an affair, as people might come to think of the destruction of a household as a minor offense.
Under the law, an extramarital affair was a criminal offense punishable by up to 2 years in prison. But only a small percentage of those deemed guilty were jailed, as infidelity is difficult to prove and enforcement of the law has waned in recent years. The plaintiffs would use the law as leverage to get a higher divorce settlement. Kim Kwang-sam, a former prosecutor, believes that abolishing the law could lead to a rise in the number of extramarital affairs.
In other nations that have struck down anti-cheating laws, such as France or Germany, they didn't go through problems caused by sexual disorders. In other words, if you don't punish those who commit adultery as criminals, it won't lead to problems that will spoil the society.
Other experts say that the ruling largely reflects the clash between a rapidly changing modern society and traditionally conservative norms. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Tobacco companies in Korea may have to change their packaging so that their health warning messages are stronger and pictures more graphic. The idea won a go-ahead from the Health Committee at the National Assembly today and will go before a full session set for next month. Our Son Jang-in has more.
Anti-smoking messages cover just 30% of cigarette packs sold in Korea and are only written warnings which are easy to ignore. In line with the government's tougher policy on smoking, the National Assembly's Health and Welfare Committee voted for passage of a revised law that forces cigarette companies to use pictures showing the harmful effects of the habit and written warnings that together should cover more than 50% of the packaging. The law also seeks to penalize tobacco firms found to be breaking the rules. They would face monetary fines of up to $9,000, be banned from doing business, or put company officials behind bars for up to a year. The revised law will become final if it gains the approval of the full parliament in a session scheduled for March 3rd. The revision is in accordance with the recommended standard for cigarette graphic warnings issued by the World Health Organization. As of last July, 179 countries had adopted the measure, with Korea being one of them, but the rules have yet to be put in place. If the law is passed in Korea, the visual warning system will become mandatory after a grace period of 18 months. Officials in favor of the move say such warnings are one of the most effective anti-smoking measures across the world. Brazil, for instance, saw its smoking rate plunge by 10 percentage points to 22% 1 year after the law was implemented. According to data by the OECD in 2014, the smoking rate for Korean men was 38%, the second highest in the world after Greece. Earlier this year, the Korean government raised cigarette prices by about $2 a pack in a bid to reduce the smoking rate. 손정인, Arirang News.
Today was the second day of a three-day government questioning session at the National Assembly. Lawmakers threw many questions at the newly appointed Prime Minister and government officials on the topic of economy. For the latest, here is Arirang's Park Ji-won.
Lawmakers fired questions at government officials on the administration's economic plans for tackling pressing issues, such as skyrocketing household debt, deepening income polarization, and stagnant economic growth. In the hot seat was the new Prime Minister Lee Wan-gu and 8 others, including the nation's finance, trade, and science ministers.
Korea's household debt currently stands at some $993 billion. Consumption has been frozen and income levels haven't increased. Households are facing the burden of higher living expenses, while companies have stopped investing. The economy has stopped its virtuous cycle of growth.
For the past 2 years, the Park Geun-hye administration has attempted to strengthen the economy and will keep pushing the necessary reforms forward. I expect we'll have visible results soon.
Economists say they agree with the government's strategy of focusing on reforms to revive the economy, but say the timing was a little late.
The administration should have focused on reforms from the very start of its term because reforms can bear fruit in the long term. As the administration now has a low approval rating, it could face obstacles to its reforms.
The government deficit and the administration's pledge to expand welfare without raising taxes were other issues criticized at the assembly. The session will continue until Friday, and the last day's focus will be on social and cultural issues. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, continuing our three-part series on what's ahead for President Park's third year in office today, we're going to focus on the economy. Arirang's Hwang Ji-hye takes a look at the Park Geun-hye administration's economic successes so far and the challenges ahead.
In her first 2 years in office, President Park Geun-hye put much emphasis on revitalizing the flagging domestic economy. As a result, Korea managed to keep up with the growth pace of the world economy while the employment rate reached 65% for the first time last year. The government's strong drive to boost the housing market also led to the number of home transactions to top 1 million in 2014, the largest in 8 years. Despite the improving economic figures, many are not feeling the difference. A recent survey shows that more than 9 out of 10 Koreans say the domestic economy has fallen into a state of depression. It's not surprising, says Shin Se-min from LG Economic Research Institute.
The structural problems that the economy is facing, like growing household debt and sluggish corporate investment, make it harder for ordinary people to feel the benefits of government stimulus measures that have a temporary impact on the economy.
The government has pledged to carry out structural reforms this year, focusing on the labor, education, financial, and public sectors. It's a welcomed move, but experts say some sectors need more attention.
The most important thing to achieve long-term growth is reforming the public sector. To be specific, reforms in the public servants' pension program should take place early this year so that it won't hurt the country's fiscal health.
They add that it's also critical to resolve the divide between regular and non-regular workers in order to increase flexibility in the labor market. And to push through such structural reforms this year, experts say that the government should ensure the related parties have a full understanding of their importance. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chery for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on Arirang TV.
Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. North Korea unilaterally decided to raise its workers' wages at the Inter-Korean Joint Industrial Complex in Kaesong starting next month. Seoul's Unification Ministry said Thursday that North Korea sent a letter to the industrial park 2 days ago saying that it's raised North Korean workers' minimum wage by 5% to $74. Opened in 2004, the Kaesong Industrial Complex is a symbol of Inter-Korean economic cooperation, with North Korean workers producing goods at cheap labor cost with South Korea's capital and technology. China is South Korea's biggest trading partner, but South Korea's one particular export item, kimchi, was not exactly easily allowed into the world's second biggest market. But that's about to change. Our Song Ji-sun tells us more.
China's Health Commission has announced that it will revise regulations applied to salted or pickled vegetable imports. Previously, the rules only allowed fewer than 30 E. coli counts per 100 grams, but it will now allow a count of up to 8,000 E. coli counts. Kimchi, Korea's fermented dish, rich in lactic acid bacteria, could not meet the old regulation, but it will be acceptable under the new rules. The only kimchi allowed to enter the Chinese market until now were fried or sautéed varieties, processes which sterilize the bacteria. Over the past couple of years, Seoul has been demanding Beijing set up a separate guideline for the kimchi or ease the standard applied to fermented food. In the meantime, Chinese kimchi imports to Korea surged to over $70 million in 2013, with an annual average of 200,000 tons used by large restaurants and catering services. While most kimchi factories in China are run by Koreans, Chinese kimchi is quickly taking over Korean tables as it is 5 times cheaper than Korean-produced kimchi. The Korean staple is classified as an extremely sensitive item in the recently agreed free trade deal between Seoul and Beijing. Its current 20% tariff will be reduced to 18% with the pact, further eroding the price competition between the Korean and Chinese produce. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
The trend of low birth rate continues in Korea. The number of newborns last year was down 0.3% from the year before. And on the back of low birth rate environment, the number of elementary school students came down to the lowest level recorded since data was first collected in 1965. And here's one element that could explain low birth rate in the country. Koreans spent an average of $280 per student per month on private education expenses last year. The amount takes up nearly 7% of a household's disposable income when raising a child. The proportion shoots up to around 14% when raising 2 children. Almost 1 in 3 people across the world now own a smartphone. The Strategy Analytics says that the number of smartphone users exceeded 2 billion for the first time last year. That's 37% more than in 2013. And the number is still rising, with more than 2.5 billion expected to be using the devices by the end of the year. Strategy Analytics says the smartphone has become one of the most commonly used electronic devices in history and is becoming a hub for people in their daily lives. And with that number on the rise, no wonder global tech giants are racing to develop their own mobile payment services. One in the race is Google, which is said to be planning on announcing a new payment method called Android Pay this spring. Kim Ji-yeon has the story.
Gone are the days of paying for things with cash or plastic. Your smartphone will soon pay for whatever you need. Google is reportedly going to announce a new payment method called Android Pay in May to boost its Google Wallet platform. Android Pay is expected to allow users to upload their credit or debit card information to the app for single tap transactions. Ars Technica reports this will make it easier for third-party apps to use the near-field communication chip that's installed on Android phones. This is Google's latest attempt to rival Apple Pay, launched last October equipped with fingerprint verification technology. Instead of punching in a PIN number, users press the iPhone home button while placing the device on a reader. To develop a similar contactless payment method, Google acquired SoftCard, a mobile payment app jointly created by major U.S. wireless carriers AT&T, Verizon Wireless, and T-Mobile USA. With the acquisition, Android phones sold by the three wireless carriers will pre-install the Google mobile payment system starting later this year. The U.S. search giant is expected to make the installation of the app mandatory for all Android phones sold in the U.S., a move that's sure to annoy Samsung Electronics, which is pushing for its own mobile payment service. The Korean tech giant is expected to feature what's tentatively being called Samsung Pay on its upcoming Galaxy S6 smartphone next month. The company's vice chairman Lee Jae-yong met recently with Peter Phil, the co-founder of the online money transfer company PayPal. Although the meeting was disclosed, various reports say the two discussed the Korean tech giant's strategy and financial technology. Their meeting comes a week after Samsung Electronics acquired LuPay, a U.S.-based mobile payments technology startup, indicating its own ambitions in the realm of contactless payments. U.S.-based market tracker Forrester researcher estimates that the global mobile payment market will grow $200 billion annually to more than $900 billion in 2017. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Three men have been arrested in the U.S. on charges of conspiring to support and eventually join the militant group calling itself Islamic State. To tell us more, Paul E. is joining us from the News Center. Paul, one of these suspects was apprehended as he was about to board a plane to join IS. What other information do we have on this group?
Well, all three lived in New York, the youngest in the group just 19 years old. They're going to see their first day in court on Wednesday after what appears to be a months-long probe by the FBI. They allegedly plan to launch attacks on American soil, with at least one of the suspects saying he'd be willing to kill the U.S. president if asked. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
Three men from Brooklyn have been arrested and charged with conspiring to support the Islamic State group. Authorities said Akbar Saeed Akhmetov was arrested as he was getting ready to board a flight to Turkey from John F. Kennedy International Airport, planning to go to Syria early Wednesday. The second man, Abdurasul Jurabov, was scheduled to follow him next month. The third suspect, Abror Habibov, who is the oldest of the three, is believed to have helped finance their travels.
So the initial actions were effectively to go to Syria and attempt to join ISIL in Syria.
The two younger suspects appeared in court in New York on Wednesday, while the third faced a judge in Florida. They came to the attention of federal agents in recent months after one of them posted messages on an Uzbek language website expressing support for the extremist group. A criminal complaint showed that he also offered to kill the U.S. president if ordered to do so, as well as carry out attacks in the U.S. if he was unable to go to Syria. He repeated those very sentiments when federal agents interviewed him at his home in August last year. If convicted, each face a maximum sentence of 15 years behind bars. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And shifting to Africa now, police in Nigeria say that an American missionary has been kidnapped by a group of armed men. And this woman, Paul, had been working at a school there for the last 6 years. Is there any connection to the militant group Boko Haram?
Well, the abduction took place in the central state of Koji. Security sources, according to Reuters, say it's an area that's seen a low-level activity by those Islamic insurgents, but authorities haven't ruled out their involvement. A fellow teacher said he saw Reverend Phyllis Sorter being dragged away by a gang after hearing a gunshot. The police commissioner of Koji State said that progress was being made to secure her release.
And I can assure you that we will get results. Even yesterday, maybe we had the governor, His Excellency, Idris Madasi, summoned all the security chiefs to his office and gave us a marching order that we must do everything possible to secure the release of the Reverend.
The U.S. State Department said it heard the reports but could not make further comments in the interest of privacy. Nigeria is known to be one of the world's worst countries for kidnapping, described as a major criminal enterprise that makes millions of dollars a year.
And turning to the latest in Ukraine crisis, economic problems appear to be mounting against the government there, and Kiev's central bank has halted almost all commercial currency trading until the week's end. What's behind this drastic move?
Well, it's an effort to keep the Ukrainian currency from free falling any further, which has already lost more than half its value so far this year after it was slashed by half in 2014. Meanwhile, Russia has renewed its threat to switch off its natural gas deliveries if it does not immediately receive advance payment. Kiev says it won't pay another cent until Moscow delivers the supplies it already paid for. Amid the standoff, Russian President Vladimir Putin warned the consequences could be dire.
I know that 4 million people live there. I imagine these people will be left without gas for the winter. Not only that, there is famine there already, and the OSCE has already confirmed a humanitarian disaster there. And now to cut them off from gas, how would you call it? It smells of genocide.
This as a fragile ceasefire is holding on in eastern Ukraine. Government forces say it recorded no casualties in the span of 24 hours, a first in several weeks. Pro-Russian separatists claim to have pulled back heavy weapons from the front lines under the internationally brokered truce.
And Paul, finally, in France, mysterious drones have been spotted flying over landmarks in Paris. Authorities there are still trying to determine who is behind the controls and their motivations. And obviously, the French capital is still on high alert after last month's deadly terror attacks there. How many of these drones are we talking about?
Well, at least 5 sightings were reported in a second straight night in the City of Lights, including areas near the Eiffel Tower, the French National Assembly, as well as the U.S. Embassy. Now, to be clear, we're most likely looking at small remote-controlled gadgets that have recently gained popularity. The government has reassured that the unmanned aerial machines do not pose a security risk, but did warn the public to remain vigilant and that an investigation was underway. Speaking to Europe 1 Radio, the CEO of drone manufacturer Parrot said that the report should not be a source for alarm.
There have not been any confirmed cases of terrorists using drones. What would they do with them? What is the potential threat? It's not something that's happened before. We shouldn't give in to panic or fantasy.
Separately, police arrested 3 Al Jazeera journalists after they were found to be illegally flying a drone over a Paris park. Prosecutors say they are not tying it to the landmark sightings. Al Jazeera tweeted that its journalists had merely been working on a report on the mystery drones. Charity?
All right. Thank you so much, Paul. And let's leave it there for now. See you again in just about 2 hours.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather outlook. We kicked off the Thursday morning under cloudy skies and flurries falling in some regions, but conditions quickly gave way to bright and clear skies. So recently we got to enjoy mild winter conditions, but cold air is set to move in from the north, leading to a plunge in numbers. So tomorrow morning lows will dip to -6 here in the capital, which is about 9 degrees lower compared to today. So make sure to bundle up as wind chills will make conditions feel much chillier than the actual numbers. Other than that, the good news is that yellow dust has finally completely moved out, so air quality is back in the average range nationwide. Looking ahead, numbers will bounce back for the weekend, and there is a possibility of showers in Jeju on Saturday evening, which will spread to other regions by Sunday. On to tomorrow's readings. Seoul should reach a high of 3, Daegu and Gwangju 5, Busan hits 7. Meanwhile, Jeju reaches a high of 5, Dokdo 2, Mount Kumgang hits -5. Those are the updates I have for you now, and I'll see you after 10.
See you then, Bo-young, and that will do it for this edition of Arirang News. Thanks for watching.